We're back with 8.3 notes. We're going to be solving those quadratic equations today, but we're going to be using square roots this time. First thing I need to know is, what is a square root? Well, a square root is any time you take the square root of a perfect square. ... Well, what's a perfect square? Perfect square is squaring an integer. So if I say 0 squared is 0, 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, we'd square 3, square 4, square 5. You'll notice that these are numbers that you recognize. You use them for the difference of squares in Unit 7. You will need to square root them today as well. There is nothing that you will need to know past 144. So 144, when we square root it, we get 12. 81, if we square root it, we get 9. So it looks like this. Square root of 81 makes 9. Okay? But 9 is not the only way to make an 81. We could also have a negative 9. So you'll notice today that you technically still have two answers, but we're going to be saying it could be positive 9, it could be negative 9. Okay? All right, so that's what those numbers mean. How are we going to know when to use square roots? Well, we're going to do that anytime that you have an x squared and a constant, but you don't have a plain x. So it would be something like 3x squared minus 36 equals 0. You have an x squared and a constant, but there's no x's. It doesn't say like plus 2x or minus 4x. Okay? All right, as for steps to solve this, they're going to be pretty straightforward. You're going to add or subtract to move a constant to the other side, if there is one. You're going to divide by whatever number is with x squared, and then you're going to square root both sides. Again, make sure you understand that you have two answers. You have one positive and one negative answer. So we do that by writing plus or minus of that number. Okay? You do not have to use squiggles, so you don't have to use your braces, but you do need to make sure that that symbol is in your answer. Okay? All right, so if we go ahead and we start solving problems 1 and 2. 1 and 2 don't have anything to add or subtract. There's nothing to cancel. But we are going to try and get x by itself. So to do that, we need to divide by 3 on both sides. The 3's cancel. I have x squared equals 25. Now, to get rid of that squared, I'm going to have to square root both sides. Remember, what you do to one, you have to do to the other. A squared and a square root cancel out. So all I have left in my answer is x equals, well, what's the square root of 25? We can look back up at the top. We're going to need our 5. So our final answer would say x equals plus or a minus of 5. That's a positive or a negative 5. Okay, that's what that answer is telling you. Let's try number 2. Same idea, nothing to add or subtract. So we're going to divide 2 on both sides. That gives me 16. We can square root both sides. Sorry, I wrote a 6. Let me fix that, sorry. 16, there we go. We're going to square root both sides, so the square and the square root cancel. We are left with x equals 4, but it's positive or negative 4. Okay. Go ahead and flip to the next page. All right, on that second page, we're looking at number 3. Now we have something to add or subtract. We got to get rid of the 36 first. We're going to add 36 to both sides. 4x squared equals 36. Then I can divide by my 4 on both sides. That gives me 9, and I'm ready to square root. Square root cancels the squared, and my final answer is x equals a positive or a negative of 3. I'm square rooting the 9 each time. All right, number 4, we're going to add 20 to both sides. Again, make sure you're showing the work. I'd hate for you to get points taken off just because you didn't write plus 20 on both sides. All right, 5x squared makes 20. We're going to divide by the 5 again on both sides. Gives me x squared equals 4. To get rid of the squared, we're going to have to square root because that's how we cancel it. And our final answer would be x equals plus or a minus of 2. We square rooted the 4. Okay. Moving right on down to 5, we're going to add 25 to both sides. When I do that, I get 2x squared equals 200, and we're ready to divide by 2. How do I get rid of the squared? We're going to square root both sides, which cancels out the squared. And my final answer is going to be x equals a plus or a minus of 10. Number 6 is going to be a little weird. Let's see what happens. If I subtract 18 from both sides, and I might need to do that in a calculator, I would end up getting a negative 48. Everything looks good so far. I would divide by 3 on both sides, and that would give me a negative 16. Now, something might be standing out to you, because as soon as I go to cancel out my squared, what happens if I try to square root a negative? You can't. Make yourself a little side note here. You can't square root a negative number. So what does that give us for an answer? It gives us the answer non-real answers. Okay, which means they're imaginary numbers. We're not going to deal with that. I don't need to know what they are, but as far as what you write down on your paper, I'm looking for this. Okay? All right, we're going to do 2 more questions at the bottoms, number 7 and 8. Number 7, it might look like it's going to be the same thing because there's a couple negatives in there, but let's see what happens. Subtract 7 on both sides. Gives me negative 5x squared equals negative 45. Now if I divide by negative 5 on both sides, my negatives go away and I get a positive 9. If I square root to cancel my squared, I get my final answer, which is real. X equals a positive and a negative of 3. Okay. All right, we're going to have one more, number 8. We're going to subtract 42 from both sides. Negative 7x squared equals a negative 252. If I divide by negative 7 on both sides, you might need a calculator. That's going to give us, let's see, 36. And when we square root both sides to cancel out my squared, I get my final answer. X equals a plus or minus of my 6. Okay, that is all for our notes on 8.3. If you have any questions, you might want to consider attending tutorials. Otherwise, we are all set. You can start your practice.